Hear ye, hear ye. The end of CAFO meeting is about to start.
All right. Right on.
Thanks for being here. First thing is, please turn your cell phones off if you haven't already. Second thing is, welcome. We're glad you're here. We're looking forward to hearing from Diane and learning a great deal, because this is an issue whose time is way past due. And we're here to learn so we can be more effective in stopping these things. Why don't we go around and everybody just say your name? Lots of us know each other, but we don't know everybody. I'm Miriam Kasia.
Diane Rosenberg.
I'm Stephanie Domingo. Margie Benson. James Stephen.
Dawn Jones.
Aaron Solander.
Bruce Grove.
Beverly Link.
Emmeline Krause.
Lynn Gallagher.
Kim Fox.
Carol Throckmorton. Catherine Nicholson.
Nancy Cogan.
So welcome everybody, and especially new faces. It's really nice to have you here. Couple of little logistical things. If you aren't familiar with this library, the bathroom is down to the hall and first door on your right around the corner. Aha. Sign in, please. And we just started. I'm doing introductions, so you get to say your names.
Say your name, Dee.
I'm Paul Palmer. I'm with her.
And you're going to hold up the male energy tonight, right?
Like it might be needed.
That's needed, yes.
That's okay, Paul. You have broad shoulders.
Be careful, we got you outnumbered.
There's a packet at each seating place. They're all the same. So that's for you to take with you, so you can take this information with you and use it. Diane will be going through a lot of it with us. There's also some handouts here. You can help yourself on the way out. They're mostly from JFAN, which is the organization that Diane started and is active with in Fairfield. You'll hear more about that. There are snacks and drinks over here. We're going to have about a 10-minute break somewhere in the middle. You will all come here, fill a plate, and eat, because I'm not taking it home. Diane will give us about a 1-hour program, PowerPoint, and we're going to learn a great deal. And some of it's going to be tough, but we need to know it. And then we'll have our break, and then we're going to have some Q&A, and following that, a short period of time to do some strategizing about what might be next, how we can be effective with what we're learning here tonight. Any questions? Okay. With no further ado, I'll put on my glasses so I can introduce Diane formally. Diane Rosenberg is the President and Executive Director of Jefferson County Farmers and Neighbors, Inc. That's JFAN. And she is also an Iowa consultant with the national organization Socially Responsible Agricultural Project, and a founding member of Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture. She knows what she's talking about. She's been educating communities and providing informational guidance and support to communities fighting unwanted CAFOs for over 10 years. And we welcome her to Johnson County, because that's where we're at. Thank you, Diane, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I've got a lot of stuff to tell you. So, and don't be surprised if it's going to feel a little bit overwhelming at times. You know, some of you, I'm sure there's like different levels of knowledge and understanding here. So if you know a lot of this stuff, then just bear with me. If this is new stuff to you, then you're going to learn a lot. And and in your packet, one of the things that I did in talking with Deborah, you know, from what I understand, in preparation for your meeting with the advisory committee next week, different members of 100 Granny is going to be going into specific areas in order to speak on a particular area of impact or what have you. So I put together a list of studies that corresponds to what I'm going to be talking about tonight, and that you can dive into a little bit more deeply. And then at the end, I've got 3 websites that you can also learn more about the whole CAFO situation on those. The JFAN website, the SRAP website, and the IRA, Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture. And then I've got ads that we've done that has a lot of information. The JFAN website is packed with stuff. We do quarterly ads, throughout the year on some area of education, and then we expound upon it. These are some of the ads that we've done. I didn't have time to do the other 3 or 4 that you've got, but I gave them to you on a hard copy. And on our website, all the ads are there, and then all the pages that expounds on these are on our website too. So, there's a lot of really good information there, okay? So let me just, talk a little bit about JFAN, SRAP, and the Iowa Alliance, just very, very briefly. So JFAN is a 501c3 educational organization. We got founded 12 years ago, 2005, when some CAFOs were threatening just right outside the Fairfield border. And, the organizers at that time, they didn't know anything about CAFOs, so they got together and they learned as much as possible. And then they realized pretty quickly that they needed to keep a sustained presence in the county in order to fight the CAFO that was threatening, as well as the others that they were seeing coming. So JFAN has been in operation for 12 years, and I joined them about 10 years ago, after they've been in business for about 10 years. And we focus primarily on Jefferson County, and we monitor for CAFO activity twice a week. We let people in the community within a 2-mile radius of a proposed CAFO know if something is proposed. We have a packet of information and maps that we send them. And if the community wants help in organizing against the CAFOs, we'll go in and help them with a lot of organizational support, informational support, technical support, that type of thing. And I really do a lot of community education. I would say that's primarily the foundation of my work with JFAN, because we feel very strongly an educated community is an empowered community. They know what the problem is, and they know what to do if the problem arises. So we spend a lot of time doing that.
How do you know where proposed CAFOs are going to go in? How do you find out that information?
Yeah, we find out through the we call the assessor's office twice a week, and we check with the DNR twice a week. And
I'm going to suggest, thanks Lynn, it's a good question, but I'm going to suggest we hold questions, make yourself a note, because we will have a Q&A period.
Okay.
And we want to be able to get through what Diane has prepared for us. Thanks.
And we'll have time for questions, definitely, at the end. And so I'd say about 3/4 of my time I work with JFAN. The other quarter I work with SRAP, Socially Responsible Agricultural Project. That's a national organization. We have consultants all around the country helping communities where a CAFO comes in, and we help them to organize. In all the same ways I mentioned with JFAN, we help communities to organize. So I work with JFAN in Jefferson County, with SRAP all around the state, and we do everything that we can to help communities. SRAP basically started 20 years ago under similar circumstances. I think the original people were facing an 80,000 head sow operation in Missouri, and it brought together the organization. And then I also work with the Iowa Alliance for Responsible Agriculture. And IRA, as we call it, is a statewide coalition of national, state, and community organizations. We're all fighting against CAFOs. There's about 25 or more of us now. And we're advocating for a factory farm moratorium until there's less than 100 water impairments in the state. And we always welcome new members, and at some point, if 100 grannies want to join, I've talked to Deborah a little bit about this as an option, you are, always welcome to join us if you are willing to take a stand for a moratorium until there's less than 100 water impairments in the state. Now, I want to say right up front, and we would welcome you. We would utterly welcome you. I want to say right up front that JFAN is not anti-agriculture. I forgot I have this. Okay, we are pro-agriculture. And, we support responsible, respectful, and regenerative agriculture, as this ad here kind of outlines all the things we support, and you actually have a copy, in your papers there. And we'll go into a little bit about what that is when we talk about what a traditional farm is. We don't consider CAFOs farms. We certainly don't consider them legitimate farms. These are corporate industrial agricultural facilities. They're operated based on economic efficiencies, not traditional animal husbandry practices. They create a lot of pollutants, but they're not regulated like other polluting industries. In fact, if they were regulated like other polluting industries, we probably wouldn't have the explosion of CAFOs that we have in Iowa right now. And because of these loopholes and these lax regulations that our state legislature basically sets up for Iowa, we have this huge problem here in Iowa. But when I say that JFAN supports, when I say JFAN supports, regenerative agriculture, it's really important that as you're speaking on behalf of opposing CAFOs, that you frame it that you're supporting regenerative, responsible, respectful agriculture, whatever words you want to use, traditional independent farms, because you're going to be saying you're anti-agriculture. And the thing is, you're not. I'm assuming you're not. JFAN isn't. We need food. So, it's a matter of how we raise our food. Now, before we talk about a CAFO, I want to spend a minute, let's go there. I want to spend a minute talking about what a traditional farm is. And I should have put a picture in there. A traditional independent farm has, the hogs are allowed to graze outdoors and root around, or they may be raised in hoop house buildings where they have deeply bedded straw. I should have had a picture in there, so you would have seen it. Some deeply bedded straw, because they like to root in that straw. And they have access to the outdoors through hoop houses. They're allowed to express their natural behaviors. And if they're managed properly, hoop houses and traditional independent farms don't smell. You get a barnyard odor. You're always going to have an animal odor, but you don't have that stench, that noxious stench that you get with CAFOs. When they're outdoors on pasture, their waste products fall to the ground. It's not a liquid manure. They either urinate or they defecate, and it's not mixed together. So when they urinate, they water the grass. When they defecate, what happens is the manure breaks down aerobically, with exposure to light and air and the natural soil microorganisms that exist in the soil and also exist in the manure. And so immediately a decomposition process, a natural decomposition process starts. And then the hogs, they kind of walk over it, they grind it into the dirt, and it builds soil health. If it's a hoop house, that straw is composted. It has the manure in it. It's composted, and then when it's ready, it gets applied as manure, as a fertilizer on the fields. They're also traditional farms are also the owner of the farm owns their own hogs, and they decide how to manage their hogs and their farms. They're usually smaller and self-regulating, and antibiotics are not routinely used because they don't need to. The animals aren't all crammed together, basically sharing, bacteria and germs and viruses with each other in such close quarters. The meat is high in healthy omega-3 fatty acids, and the profits stay within the community. We'll be talking a little bit about that in a bit. And it builds local economies, and it supports the local business infrastructure. Now, truthfully, for centuries, this is how, animals were raised and how farms were managed until about 50 or 60 years ago when the industrial model was first introduced. And I recommend, if you want to really learn more about that, there's a fabulous book called The Meat Racket by Christopher Leonard, and he talks about, how this system whole started. And it started with a woman that was raising chickens, and she got a shipment. Instead of whatever the number was, 200, she got 2,000. A mistake. So it was a mistake that started the whole ball rolling down the hill. It's a really interesting book. But the interesting thing is that 70% of the world still feeds itself on large-scale, small farms. So, people will say, it can't be done. It's being done. Okay, now let's talk about what a CAFO is. Okay? So this is the outside of a building, throughout, and there's different types of buildings, so this is, I don't know what the different ones are called. I don't think it's a wind tunnel building, at least we can't see. Sometimes you get buildings that have like these big fans, like at the end, and I think that's a wind tunnel building. But basically the animals, are confined 24/7, their whole life, in these confinements. The only day they're outside is when they walk in and when they walk out. And, they stand on these slatted floors. You can see these slats in here. And those slatted floors allow their waste products to go down into a pit that can be anywhere from 6 to 8 feet deep. And the larger, the 6 to 8, a 6-foot pit basically can hold manure for about 6 months, and an 8-foot for about a year. And the manure and the manure and the urine and the feces are combined, and it makes a liquid manure, and that decomposes. There should be there's handouts in the back, for you. That decomposes anaerobically because there's no light, there's no air, and you don't have the soil microorganisms. So when it decomposes anaerobically, here's another picture of these poor animals. Those are gestation crates. So when it decomposes anaerobically, it creates over 300 volatile organic compounds, about 150 of which are gases, and of those, hydrogen sulfide and ammonia are 2 of the worst. And those are the ones that really create a terrible odor that you smell. Some of the CAFOs, the older ones, have lagoons outside. I don't know if you've seen pictures of these big pools outside. And they have a shallow pit that pumps the manure into these big lagoons. They have these pit fans on the side of the building, these pit fans there, and those have to go all the time, because if they don't, and they're blowing the air out from the CAFO, because if they don't go all the time, the hogs will die in there in about an hour from the hydrogen sulfide, because it's a very, very toxic gas. Now, these gases also blow, these fans also blow particulates out into the area, into the community, and that includes, dander, dried feces, dust, and all sorts of bacteria and stuff is attached to all of that. People breathe that in. That's going out into the community, and people breathe it in, and it creates a lot of lung issues for people. It's important to understand that that CAFOs are operated based on economic efficiencies. And it's a low margin, high volume business, so they really try to cut corners every step of the way. And so all the decisions are based on profitability. And the corporations, they're not speaking to the community, but they're speaking to their members of the board. So they're shareholders. So that's what's really driving, the decisions that a CAFO makes. Okay, so who owns CAFOs? Well, there's a lot of different configurations. So and I'm going to talk about a couple of them, but first we need to talk about what the integrator is, because I'm going to be using that term. And the integrator is the large corporation that kind of drives the whole industry. You know, it could be, you've probably heard of Tri-Oak and Brenneman's and Cargill, which is now JBS, and Smithfield, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all integrators. They own the hogs. They either source, some of them grow the feed. They slaughter, process, and market the meat products. And so pretty much they're handling the hogs from start to finish, except when they're in the CAFO building, in some cases. Now, when I said there are various configurations, one of the configurations is we have a local farmer that decides to be a contract grower for the corporation. And they typically build a CAFO on their own land. They pay a mortgage for a 2,500 head CAFO. The price is now about $750,000 that they pay over 15, typically over 15 years. And as I said, the corporation owns the hogs, so they truck them in. And, you know, the contract grower is responsible for raising the hogs. You know, basically everything's automated, you know, so they have to make sure that there's feed in the you know, feed mill, those, I don't know what they're called, those canisters, those big canisters outside.
Hopper.
The what?
The hopper.
The hopper, you know, and everything gets automatic. The water comes in automatically. They just have to kind of check, make sure that the climate control system is working. They have to double check. Now, if they're, you know, farrowing, you know, basically helping the mothers to have their babies, then they might be more actively involved, but pretty much this is an automated business. And then so the corporation delivers the hogs, provides the feed, provides the veterinary care, the drugs, and detailed instructions on how they want to raise their hogs, you know, how they want the contract grower to raise their hogs, as well as build their buildings. They have specific things that they, you know, want. Each corporation will have their own way that they want it done. And then when the hogs achieve market weight, which is about 280 pounds, the corporation picks up the hogs, they go for slaughter, and the CAFO owner fulfilled his or her, you know, agreement for raising that rotation of hogs. And typically they raise 2 to 2.5 rotations a year. They go like 4.5 months, something like that. Now, the contract grower gets a price per head on the CAFOs, on the hogs, and I've been told by Tom Fegan, I don't know if many of you know Tom Fegan, but he's a lawyer up in, I think, the Cedar Rapids or somewhere thereabouts area, and he does a lot of work with these CAFO owners. He looks at their contracts. $8 to $10 a head is what they get for each hog that they raise. And a lot of farmers do this just to get the manure. They're not making a lot of money on the hogs because they got to pay that big mortgage back, you know. And once they pay the mortgage back, after 15 years, that building is old. You know, it usually needs upkeep and what have you. So, you know, so like I said, a lot of them do it for the manure. You know, it's a supplemental business for them. Unless they have many, many CAFOs, you can't make a living on one CAFO. Now, another scenario would be the corporation owns everything. They own the land, they build the buildings, they hire people to run the CAFO. They hire people to run the CAFO, and these are harder to fight because the contract grower has roots in the community and can sometimes be, you know, persuaded not to put their CAFO in, but not always, you know. But the corporations, they don't care. They just want to put their CAFO in. They don't really care. Some of them will back off. We had one in Wayne County that just backed off with Iowa Select, but they don't always. They're harder to fight. Now, another scenario, another scenario might be kind of a hybrid, and Eichelberger's does this. I don't know if you're familiar with Eichelberger. They're based out of Wayland. The farmer owns the land. Eichelberger builds the confinement. The local farmer runs the operation and gets the manure as part of their agreement. And then the ownership of the building is turned over to the farmer after about 10 years. And he does it that way, I understand, because he doesn't need the manure. You know, he's the integrator. He doesn't need the manure. So this is a way of making it more profitable for him. And like I said, there's a lot of different configurations. I'm sure that there are others as well. There's a lot of creativity that goes into these things. Okay, let's talk a little bit about money with CAFOs. So, you know, the farmer has a $750,000 building. You know, I mean, how many 21-year-old farmers, you know, can walk into like a $750,000 loan from a bank? Well, they can, because the USDA will can guarantee, you know, 85 to 90% of the loan value. So they're really easy to, you know, you and I are on the hook for that if they default on the CAFO. This is our tax money that's risked. You know, so the contract growers, they can go into a bank and get a loan from the bank, you know, and it can be backed by the government. You know, I believe the corporations can do that too. They can work with either Farm Credit Services or go through the Farm Services Agency to do that. Farm Credit Services is a government agricultural banking service. It's private. But Farm Service Agency is not. That's government. But they handle the loans. There are also funds that you can get from the NRCS's EQIP program, the Environmental Quality Investment Program. I can't remember. I just blanked out on it. But EQIP theoretically is supposed to cover conservation efforts and help producers meet environmental regulations. And some of the funds can go and help cover the cost of the actual pit part of the building construction, because that's considered an environmental protection. And speaking of environmental protections, these CAFO owners can also get some help through the state, through the pit tax exemption, or I think they call it the pollution control exemption or something like that. And this is a property tax break that these CAFO owners get on the square footage of the pit themselves. So that, you know, whatever it costs, you know, whatever the square footage is, that's what they get deducted from their taxes. They don't have to pay that in taxes, because the pit is considered a pollution control device. Even though it's spewing odors, it's a pollution control device for the manure. I really feel like this can be legally challenged, you know, if someone really wanted to do that. And the thing is, you know, we originally thought that, well, if that was eliminated, then, you know, the counties would have more money. But that's actually not the case, because we met at an Iowa Alliance meeting, an IRA meeting. We met with William Peterson, who's the president of the Iowa State Association of Counties, or State County Association, ISACs. And he said, no, it doesn't work that way. He said what's happening is the agricultural landowners that don't have CAFOs, but they're paying taxes on their land, they're actually subsidizing the amount of money that the pit tax exemption is saving the CAFO owner. So if you've got agricultural land, from what he told us, because we were like, really? What, you know, it's like your taxes are a little bit higher because their taxes are a little bit lower, property taxes. And that's our lovely state legislature that passes laws like this. Okay. Now, let's talk about siting CAFOs, where they're built. Now, CAFOs can be built pretty much anywhere, with some exceptions. For obvious reasons, you can't do it in a floodplain. And there are some, obviously they didn't follow, you know. You can't do it in a 100-year floodplain of a major water source. And there are also some restrictions and guidelines for building on alluvial soil, which is soil that's deposited by running water, which can or may not be in a floodplain. You can build on karst terrain, which is bedrock that is dolomite, or here in Iowa it's limestone, and it's dissolvable. So you wind up getting these channels that go from the surface all the way down to the groundwater underneath. And if you apply manure on there, if there's a spill or what have you, it can make its way down into the groundwater. This is a big problem in northeast Iowa. You can build a CAFO there, except you can't build near a sinkhole. And you have to be 1,000 feet away from a sinkhole, and you have to also, you can't have an earthen basin, one of these lagoons. And there are also some separation distances from waterways, from homes, from schools, churches, public use areas. One of your handouts gives you the separation distances for CAFOs that were built after 2003. But if your CAFO is 500 animal units or less, now 500 animal units is equals to, one animal unit is, a hog is like 4/10 of an animal unit. So, because they base it on like a cow, like a beef cattle. That's one animal unit, it's weight-wise. So if it's less than 500 animal units, which is 1,249 or less, you can build it right next to a house. You can build it anywhere. You have some separation distance from waters, but this CAFO in Washington County was put 173 feet away from that bedroom window. And that's like a 1,240 head CAFO, 1,200 heads, something like that. They stink. So this is a big loophole that we've got. And CAFOs are often built in areas where you've got less economic vitality, because people are less able to fight back. Why do people build CAFOs and not traditional farms? It's hard to get bank loans if you don't have a contract. So if you're working, you want to, do like a local food, small scale, you want to build some, outbuildings or what have you, unless you've got a contract that says this is how much I'm going to be bringing in, it's really hard to get a loan. In Jefferson County, we had somebody that wanted to put in a 20,000 head organic chicken operation, and neighbors didn't want that, even though it was organic. It still has a lot of issues. And so I talked with him. What about 1,000 head? We talked for a long time, like many times. What about 1,000 head CAFO, organic chicken operation? I can't get loans from the bank. They won't give me a loan unless I have a contract that I would have, with this egg company. And that's really hard for people to get, that kind of money, without that kind of a contract, because they're guaranteed. It's easy to walk into a CAFO contract. And it's also one of the reasons that people don't do many more smaller scale farms is because we've lost a lot of that agricultural infrastructure that is necessary to support these smaller scale farms, like the abattoirs, the lockers, the sale barns, the feed stores, the even small hardware stores, like different things that would normally support this kind of a business. They're gone because the integrator takes care of all of that now. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the regulatory process. I'm just going to kind of go through this. Under 500 animal units, no review. No manure management plan. No separation distances except for water. And you have to get a stormwater permit, number 2, a general building permit that anybody building anything needs to get if you're breaking more than an acre of land, which they typically don't for this size. So a lot of times you don't even know anything is going in until you start to see the shovel going in the ground. 500 to 999 animal units, which is, $1,250 to $2,499. They do have to have a manure management plan, a construction design statement, which is basically a checklist that says how they're going to build their building. for a $750,000 building that has implications for the community, it's a checklist. How they're going to do this, the steel, the this, and what have you. No engineering plans are required. They can submit them, but they're not required. The permit, the stormwater permit, there's no formal review, a cursory review of the manure management plan, and they can start building within about 30 days of having their manure management plan approved, which usually happens in a week or less. Now, for a larger CAFO, 2,500 hogs or more, you need all the things I just mentioned, plus the master matrix and adopting counties, a water permit if you're withdrawing more than 25,000 gallons a day, which is unlikely, for most hogs, maybe cattle. Engineering review by the DNR. Supervisor notice, they have to give notice within 14 days that a CAFO that size is coming in, and they have to collect public comments within 30 days and submit them to the DNR. Still a cursory review of the manure management plan. They're very complex, these manure management plans. DNR has no time to review them. They're told not to review them. It's a 60-day review process, and there is an on-site field inspection from the field office to make sure all the measurements are correct. And then, once that's it. And it's not very much. It really isn't very much. I work with SRAP with other communities, other states. I hear what the consultants work with in other states, and they have a lot more to go through. Many of the states have a lot more, more requirements than what we have here in Iowa. Okay, let's talk about the role of supervisors right now. They have limited power, but they're not powerless. And you're really lucky. You've got really good supervisors that are responsive to this issue. You are really lucky because we don't have that in Jefferson County. I can tell you that. So here's some of the things they can do. They can hold public meetings when there's a CAFO, like a large CAFO proposed. They could do it if there's a small one, if they wanted. They can adopt the master matrix, which your county does. They can score the master matrix. They can learn how to properly score it, and have an open process that allows for community input to the whole scoring process. I can't tell you how many counties their supervisors don't know what the heck to do with these master matrices. They have no clue. They can influence farmers in the counties to, if there's a CAFO threatening, they can meet with them and talk with them, and sometimes they could have some sway if they've got a good relationship. They can lobby on your behalf, either at the state level, or they can lobby with the Iowa State County Association. I always mess that one up. They can magnify your voice with a resolution, which your supervisors have done, or a community rights ordinance, and they can encourage incentives for regenerative farming opportunities. They can work, with different programs, maybe find some funding or come up with some creative, they can do creative things, if they want, to make it give more opportunities for regenerative farming. I don't know, how much is available out there, but I do know that, there are things that can be done, that just open some doors, even if it's helping people get, connecting with USDA facilities or with practical farmers or what have you. So work with your supervisors to, pursue any and all, of these to protect your county. All right, let's talk about impacts now. So let's talk a little bit about manure. As I mentioned, it's an anaerobic decomposition. The 300, VOCs and gases. Hydrogen sulfide and ammonia are two of the worst. You also have, the particulates from the dried manure get into the community. And manure also contains antibiotics, heavy metals, hormones from the feed. and then viruses from, the level of their health, of the hog's health. Now, we'll talk a little bit about some of the health impacts, the air quality. Let's talk about air quality. So the hydrogen sulfide impacts the central nervous system, and it also impacts the respiratory system. Okay? The ammonia impacts the respiratory system. So between all of that, you wind up getting wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, excessive coughing, nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting. That's from the hydrogen sulfide. Sore throat, eye irritation, runny nose, weakness, irritable bowel syndrome, depression, just a few things. And not everybody gets this. Not everybody gets sick, but enough people get sick. And especially if you've got an compromised immune system, if your children get sick, the elderly are more susceptible, it's very hard on the system. And there are numerous studies in that handout I gave you that basically illustrate this. Children are especially at risk for asthma. There's a studies by, this study is by the University, this is Stephen Wing, North Carolina, University of North Carolina. Children who attend schools near CAFOs may suffer higher incidences of asthma. Children living on farms with CAFOs where antibiotics are added to feed have higher incidence of asthma. That's University of Iowa. Neighbors living near a hog confinement may experience more depression, tension, asthma, fatigue, and confusion, and less vigor. And a 2002 report by Iowa State University and the University of Iowa determined that hydrogen sulfide and ammonia from CAFOs are a health risk for humans. And also, it's a health risk for the CAFO owners, the CAFO workers, because they're working in this awful stuff. And they have a greater chance of getting COPD from it, from breathing in that air, as well as getting infected with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So I want to talk about this a little bit because this is a big issue. It's a major public health issue, the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, because so much of the antibiotics used in this country, somewhere between 70 to 80% is used in low-dose antibiotics for the animals. Low dose for growth prevention, growth enhancement, and disease prevention. And the CDC has some really good charts on how that actually works. And the JFAN website has like a really good CDC chart on there too. And there's a very definite relationship between MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, and CAFOs. And MRSA, let me just talk about what MRSA is for a minute. MRSA is a staph infection that typically appears on the skin, but it can go internally. It's hard to treat. It can require several rounds of antibiotics, and I highly advise if anybody ever gets an infection that's kind of pussy or anything like that, you go to the doctor and you get it tested for the specific bacteria that you have, because we had it in our family twice. And my husband at the time didn't get his tested. My daughter got hers tested, but my ex-husband didn't. And they didn't give him the right antibiotic. And he almost wound up here at University of Iowa on IV antibiotics, before it was almost about to go up into his brain, because it travels from one place to another. So make sure you ever have, a suspected infection, you get tested. Okay, really important. They determine what it is. It's hard to, like I said, it's hard to treat. People with compromised immune systems are particularly vulnerable, and it can be fatal. You know, it can kill you. And there are some that are flesh-eating varieties. Not all, but there are some. There was a woman in the Batavia area that got it from manure running off into her greenhouse. And, you know, in the waters in her greenhouse. And she got infected, this leg infection. And she lost a lot of her leg. You know, it was pretty awful. She's okay now, but she's got some scars, you know. The CDC report, there's a report called Antibiotic Resistant Threats in the United States 2013. You should have a copy, a link there. Really good report to read. It's about all antibiotic resistant bacteria, not just MRSA. But they say at least 23,000 fatalities every year from these infections because we're running out of antibiotics that can treat them. More and more and more become resistant because they're being overused. University of Iowa, the first study that made that zoonotic connection, found 70% of them should be swine, and 64% of swine workers had the same strain of MRSA. You know, so that was done here. And a study that came out in February 2014 found that people living within 1 mile of which they call large, 2,500 head, which many of them are, that and more, were nearly 3 times more likely to colonize MRSA, which means you carry it. You might not get it, but if you colonize it, you have a greater chance of getting it, and you can also spread it. And then another study, Johns Hopkins, found that 11% of the MRSA patients that they surveyed, you know, were living next to a field that got manure. And there's a Texas Tech study that shows that the DNA sequences are traveling of MRSA are traveling on dust particulates, you know, and fecal particulates in the wind from the feedlot elsewhere. So you know that when they're blowing it out of those CAFOs, if there's MRSA on the DNA, you know, it's not conclusive if that will give somebody. I think they have to, you know, do more studies to see if the DNA, but that's not very reassuring, you know. So, and then this is, do I have this here? Oh yeah, and then CAFO workers, they know the study, they carry MRSA in their nasal passage for 2 weeks, even if they've been away from the CAFO for 96 hours. They still carry it in their nasal passage, because that's where a lot of the MRSA is colonized in people. And MRSA is all over the place, you know, and there's 2 types. There's community-acquired MRSA and there's hospital-acquired MRSA. Hospital-acquired MRSA is the kind that gets passed along in hospitals. Community-acquired is in the community, what takes place in the community. And there are studies, I don't have any of them here, but there are studies, I think they came out of the Netherlands, that show that those 2 types are linked now, from the community to the hospital. So, you know, it's an issue. Now, what's also concerning is that if you buy CAFO meats at the store, and you should assume that almost all the CAFO meat, all the meat you buy at the store comes out of a CAFO. Consumer Reports did a study, 69% of the raw pork that they tested contained some strain of some antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And then in 2011, the Environmental Working Group did an analysis of government data on antibiotic resistance, and just for Enterococcus, they found 81% of ground turkey, 69% of pork chops, 55% of beef, ground beef, and 39% of chicken breast, wings, and thighs had that particular antibiotic-resistant bacteria, and they found other things as well, different bacteria as well. So if you buy meat at the store, make sure it's cooked really well. Make sure you wash your hands really well, your counters, and all your cooking utensils, because, you know, it may have it. And if you've got an open cut and your immune system is low, you know, you don't want to risk that. And the CDC came to a conclusion that multi-drug resistance results in $20 million in healthcare costs every year. That doesn't have to happen. But that's what it is. Okay, let's talk a little bit about quality of life impacts, because we're coming up to about 7:30 here. I got a few more things to talk about. It's the stench that really creates a lot of the issues for people living near a CAFO. So these are very common experiences. Not everybody. What I'm telling you is not like everything 100% across the board, but enough instances that this is an issue. People have to keep their windows shut tight because they never know which way the wind is going to blow. They might have air exchangers. They got to keep them off. I know somebody has to keep his off. They don't entertain outdoors anymore or garden hardly ever. They get overrun with flies and mice. The dust from the trucks going back and forth on their property, if they have a CAFO down the road. A lot of people used to like to hang laundry outside. Can't do that anymore. Think about the poor Amish, that have to do stuff like that, and they're living near a CAFO. A lot of people really become prisoners in their own home, and they experience a lot of deep grief and frustration and depression from this powerlessness that they feel and anger. I have a friend that moved to Oregon to get away from 10,000 hogs that were literally in her backyard, half a mile away from her home. She couldn't stand it anymore. She had all those things just about that I was explaining to you before. She got hit with them, developed environmental asthma, whole thing, But not everybody can do that, So it's hard when a CAFO comes in and you can't move. It's very difficult. You can also experience residential property devaluation. It could be up to a 40% drop in property value or more. And I don't have as many studies on that sheet as I would like to, because these are not online, but whoever is doing that part of the presentation in your meeting, I've got these for you here that you can take, okay? And there's also, when we get to the water quality one, there's also this to it. Just happened to bring because it was highlighted. And it's very hard to sell your home if you wind up getting a CAFO nearby. Let's talk about rural economies. They suffer very much. Road disintegration from the heavy traffic that's driving on gravel roads, or roads that are not meant to handle these heavy tractor trailers. The counties are responsible for fixing those. In fact, one county is looking at passing their own resolution focusing on taxation, and I just want to read this to you from their resolution. I don't know if it was passed yet or not, that's why I'm not going to mention the county, but it says, "Our concern is our lack of taxation for the CAFOs. A standard $24.99 head finishing building generates a dismal $157 to our secondary roads fund. We project spending an additional $1,080 to $10,000 to maintain the roads and bridges per CAFO unit. The county is, by law, required to maintain the roads and bridges." So when they do that, that's coming out of other areas for services for the county, but that's what it does. There's a loss of jobs, so I should say loss of jobs, not lot jobs, because the rural agricultural infrastructure used to support thousands of small-scale farms. We've lost probably 92 to 94% of all our hog farms over the past 20, 30, 40 years, to CAFOs. And as a result, a lot of the businesses that we talked about before are not there anymore. So when those businesses leave, then people that were employed by those businesses don't have those jobs anymore. or people that sold, the 92 to 94% of those farms, they're not working in the county anymore. They may move to cities to get jobs. And so that creates this less population, so that creates a domino effect. More businesses close. And, you may not have as many restaurants, for example, in a business, or as many services. Maybe you originally had, I don't know, maybe 3 lawyers in a community. Now you've got 1, because they just don't have that much business to work with. A lot of towns are a shell of what they used to be. When you lose the jobs, then you lose the businesses, then you lose some of your taxation base. So the counties, again, have less money to work with. The population decreases basically lead to school closures. We just had one close in Jefferson County because there are not enough kids, in the school district anymore, in that particular school. So the kids, you have to drive them further to get to school, or they have to take buses, which is, an additional expense for the school district. And like I said, this is Prairie City in Iowa. I'm not sure where Prairie City is. I'm going to guess maybe
Southeast of Des Moines.
It is southeast of Des Moines. Okay. Well, this is, not so unusual for a lot of the cities. Pleasant Plain and Jefferson counties, kind of similar. And some of the Batavia, not Batavia, Brighton, yeah, Batavia too. They're shells of what they used to be. These used to be thriving communities. When we had a stronger local farming base. One of the things too is that, some people will say that the CAFO owner, well, they pay taxes in the county, right? So they're contributing taxes. Well, if you figure, if they're making $8 to $10 a head for the CAFO, for each hog on their CAFO, for a 2,500 head CAFO, they're making anywhere from $50,000 to $62,500 a year, gross. Okay, not including the mortgage that they're writing off. So there's not a whole lot of tax money coming in off of that income there. The corporations make all the profit. A market weight hog comes in at a finishing hog comes in at a value of about $121 right now, roughly speaking. So compare that to the 8 to 10 to the 121, and where's that money? I mean, that's going into the corporations, coffers. So they're paying taxes on their profits, but the problem is, you've got one major corporation, employing like all these different, contract growers. They may not even be in your state, in Iowa. They may not even be in the United States, because you've got JBS, that's in Brazil. You've got Smithfield, that's in China. So we're losing a lot of the taxation from any profits that these corporations are making. It's not coming to Iowa. It's not coming to Johnson County or Jefferson County. Let's talk a little bit about rural community relationships. Because CAFOs are so controversial in some communities and in some parts of the communities, it can split families apart. It can split friendships. There are times that people don't want to speak up against a CAFO because they don't want to be a bad neighbor, but then they wind up getting this thing, and then they're really resentful. And there's an article in there, that I wrote to encourage people to speak up, trying to remind people on who you really need to be a good neighbor to, because you have to kind of shift that a little bit. But it's really hard because people have all these family and friend connections that go back sometimes generations. So it really creates a lot of friction in communities, and it destroys the rural fabric. There are a lot of communities that are just not as strong socially as they used to be because these CAFOs have come in and it's been factions, Okay, let's go on to water pollution. Now, let's just take a look at some numbers here. Okay, we've got, as of September 1st, we've got 22.9 million hogs on approximately 14,000 factory farms. That's including those 5,000 that they just found, DNR just found throughout the state, generating about 22 billion gallons of sewage. There's been 800 reported manure spills since, from 96 to 2012, 185 beach warnings from 2006 to the present, 4.46 million fish killed from animal waste in those years. These are all DNR figures, except the 22 billion. That's, I think, comes out of Iowa State, and then that 45,700 CAFOs are how many CAFOs the DNR projects could be built on the amount, based on the amount of farmland we've got. Kind of a nightmare. Now, the manure is applied, is either surface applied or it's injected when it's put on the land. I don't have a picture of that. If it's surface applied, it might stay on the surface or it might get disked in with some rotors. Either way, some of that winds up in our waterways. It can get there through spills. It can get there through runoff or over application. One of the biggest ways it gets there is through the tiling system. And tiles are these pipes that are laid down under fields at different intervals in order to drain off the surface water, so that crops can grow. But what happens is when it drains down into the pipes, and the pipes take it out to either a culvert or not a culvert, like a ditch or a waterway of some sort like this. This is a picture of them putting in the tile. That all winds up eventually getting into our streams, our rivers, our lakes, Mississippi River. It's really one of the major issues why we have the water problems that we have right now. Look at this field. Look how these were all tiled. I mean, look at that drainage. I mean, it's just like a nightmare. I think that is pattern tiling too, because it's going with the topography, and that makes the drainage happen even more quickly. It's really not good for that. Most of most of the water pollution in Iowa comes from agriculture. That's a DNR figure. 92% of the nitrogen, 80% of phosphorus comes from non-point sources. That means agriculture. A point source would be a factory where there's a known pipe going into a waterway. Non-point is agriculture. And the nitrates are the nitrogen creates nitrates, so you get the blue baby syndrome, for infants, if they're drinking water that has nitrates in it. Some cancers, I think it's like ovarian and bladder cancer. There's a study in there that kind of indicates that. And there's nitrates in a lot of municipal water systems. I keep going ahead because my computer, I could see which slides, but I can't see which ones are here ahead of me. There's a lot of nitrates, in a lot of municipal water systems. Des Moines Register did a report on I think in 2015 on the DNR findings. They found over 60 cities and towns battled high nitrate levels in their drinking water from 2010 to 2015. And a third of the cities, 260 out of 880, were highly susceptible to getting contaminated by nitrates and other pollutants. That's pretty appalling. That's a lot of people whose drinking water is at risk. And the problem is, most communities cannot afford the real expensive denitration facility that the Des Moines Waterworks can afford because of their large, client base, their customers. So it's an issue, for much of Iowa. Now, when phosphorus winds up in waterways, it encourages growth of blue-green algae that sucks up the oxygen, kills fish and aquatic plants, and the nitrogen contributes to some of that too. And microcystine is one type of blue-green algae that actually is a health threat. It can make people very sick if the level is too high. Even inhaling droplets, can be unhealthy. And children and pets are especially vulnerable. If you have a dog that goes swimming in microcystine, it could be fatal. So, and then last year, the Des Moines Waterworks actually had to switch from using water from the Raccoon River, which they normally use, to the Des Moines River because they discovered higher levels of microcystine than were safe in there. So they had to switch for a little bit. And we all saw what happened in Lake Erie a couple years ago, with the whole town of Toledo having, to rely on water, with bottled water. You can also get Cryptosporidium and Giardia from the parasites that get into the water from, the manure, from the fecal matter, and those create issues in the body. So all this pollution, fish kills, reduction of recreational waters, contaminated fish, health threats for Iowans, 750 impaired waterways with 1,096 impairments as of the 2016 EPA list. Isn't that shameful? It's appalling, really. Okay, let's quickly go on here. Just want to talk about food quality. The hogs are fed like a grain diet, higher in fat, creates meat that's higher in fat, calories, omega-6s, and lower in omega-3s, those fatty acids, and you want just the opposite balance. You want higher omega-3s and lower 6s, which pastured meat has. Because omega-6s can cause a lot of inflammatory diseases if it's too much imbalanced. And you can also get foodborne illnesses, so fecal contamination of food. You buy meat, eggs, you can get these products with fecal contamination. Each year, according to the CDC, and I don't have this in this link, I don't have this one in your handout because I forgot to put that one in, but if you want to read that, you can write that down. But every year, 48 million people get sick, 128,000 people get hospitalized, 3,000 people die from foodborne illnesses. We used to have a very safe food system. We don't have such a safe food system anymore. We really don't. It's an illusion. Okay, I was going to go through odor mitigation techniques, but I'm not going to spend so much time on this. They're all marginally helpful. Landscaping is marginal. Barriers, marginal. Biofilters, the most helpful, can be very good, but those are expensive. Diet manipulation, what they put in the feed, is, can make a difference. And to some degrees it makes it worse because a lot of the ethanol byproducts, dried distiller grains, DDGs, are now put in some hog feed. Hogs can't digest that very well. They create more methane and more hydrogen sulfide, and so that creates more stink. Anaerobic digesters, really expensive. That's at some large farm somewhere, I think a cattle farm. Really expensive, really impractical, but they could work. Pit additives, a lot of people use these pit additives. Again, marginally, they're microbial digest. They digest some of the microbes that are in the manure, which cause some of the odor. It can cut down on the odor, but it's hit or miss whether or not one is going to work in their particular barn. Okay, I want to talk a little bit now about the arguments that you're going to hear. So it's good to just kind of be aware. Let me get to my notes here. Okay, so I hear this a lot. Oh, the animals are so comfortable. They're in a climate-controlled environment. They get their food and their water. They don't have to worry. They're not out with the elements. On and on and on. And the reality is these animals are miserable. They're intelligent animals. They are sensitive animals. They get very bored, and when they're crammed together, they get very stressed. They're very social animals, but when they're crammed, they can get very aggressive with each other. And sometimes they're given a drug called I never say it right, ractopamine, or also called, I think the brand name is Paline. And that's to basically cut down on the fat in their meat, which also takes away the taste. And it makes them very aggressive. They're not allowed to have their natural behaviors, and truthfully, it's a very cruel environment for them. If a pig gets really, really, really stressed, they can die from the stress. In fact, when they're trucked to a slaughterhouse, some of them do die from the stress. And if you've ever been by a CAFO close enough and you hear them screaming, that doesn't speak comfort to me. So not such a good idea. Okay, here's another one. We're feeding the world. And boy, people really, and I don't want to speak negatively about, because they're indoctrinated with this stuff. But, this is a big one. We're feeding the world. It's like a holy mission that they're on. But like as I mentioned before, 70% of the world feeds itself from small farms. We don't need the CAFOs. The UN has put out a report in 2014 that modern agricultural methods, industrial methods, can no longer feed the world because the impacts of overlapping environmental and ecological crises are linked to land, water, and resource availability. They say it has to be small-scale farms that feeds the world because basically we're destroying our environment with what we're doing. But this is the one that really gets me. The Environmental Working Group did a report, I think it was last year, and this Feed the World business, they looked at government statistics, export statistics, and they found that 86% of the food that we export goes to 20 of the world's wealthiest countries, including Canada, China, Mexico, the European Union, because they can afford to pay our prices. And only 2.3% went to the 19 most undernourished countries in the world. So that Feed the World business is really malarkey. And some article I read said, usually the industry has a lot to say about, charges against it. We're not seeing anything. They can't say, because this was all government information. You've got that study in there too. It doesn't smell. We're very responsible, or I don't smell my CAFO. You get this too. Honest to God, you get these. We're running it very responsibly. And I would like to say there are people that do. There are a lot of good players and there are some bad players. They're kind of stuck in a system right now. If they want to raise hogs, they don't have a lot of options. They're stuck in a system. I don't know that I would choose to do something like that, but, this is, they come out of a farming family, this is part of their heritage, and they're working with what they can work with, It's the system that's bad. It's not bad people, except for these few bad actors. It's the system that's bad. And so there are some that, that do run their CAFO. They keep it cleaner. They may use some pit additives or what have you. But truthfully, most smell. Most stink, And, and some people will say, well, I don't smell anything. And I would like to suggest that might be because they've been working in their CAFOs for so long. I'm guessing the nerves their olfactory nerves have been damaged from the hydrogen sulfide. You know, because that's what happens with, you know, you smell hydrogen sulfide at low levels, but at higher levels, you don't smell it, and that's when it's really dangerous because that's really doing a number on your brain. And you know, I'm not a scientist. I don't know. This is my conjecture, but I'm going to guess that over time, when you're breathing it in all the time, it's going to have an impact on your nerves. You know, and the truth of the matter is, you know, there are plenty of people living around CAFOs that do smell it. So even if you don't smell it, that person smells it, you know, and you have to acknowledge that. You know, if you're a farmer, you have to acknowledge that. Another thing, our family never gets sick. I've heard this one. We never get sick. We're so healthy. And I say, great. You know, maybe you come from healthy stock. Some people never get sick. But you know, it doesn't mean that you can't get sick. In fact, I would say there are plenty of coal miners who never get black lung disease. But that doesn't mean that breathing in coal dust is healthy. You know, and, you know, it's, you know, there are a lot of people that don't get sick around CAFOs, but there are a lot of people that do. So, you know, everybody's got a different physiology. Everybody's going to have a, you know, different reaction. And I think a lot of farming families are very active a lot of times, or, you know, they can be because a lot of times they're working in the fields. I know that you're so active working a CAFO, but, you know, you may have some cattle and, you know, and so maybe they are healthier than the average person and they don't succumb. But there's a lot of people that do succumb to a lot of these, you know, gases that they're breathing in. And you have to acknowledge that. That has to be acknowledged. And then you get people that say, but we care about the environment. And there are a lot of people that care about the environment. They care about water quality. They care about this and they care about that. But you have to also acknowledge that, yes, you might care, but this particular model still has a very negative effect on the environment for all the reasons that we have been talking about tonight. And also, certain things don't have anything to do with CAFOs. I think Deborah was telling me at some meeting, some farmer was saying, oh, but we're responsible, we care about the environment, we do buffer strips and conservation efforts. Great. That has nothing to do with CAFOs. You know, that has to do with how you're, you know, working your land and farming your land and trying to keep the nitrates from going into the water, but that's not stopping any of the odors that are coming out of the CAFO. So, you know, you have to put what they say in some context also. And you'll hear, like I said before, you're anti-agriculture, so just frame, no, we're not. We support regenerative, respectful, and responsible agriculture. Traditional, independent farmers. You know, this industry has put so many of those people out of business. But this, you know, has been the lifeblood of our country for years. And people will say, we can't go live in the past. I say, yeah, we can and we have to. You know, because this is not a sustainable system. It will not sustain us. You know, and it just can't. Now, the last thing I want to say, so important, what you can do, act. Act, 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 which, and you guys are activists. You know, what do? You agitate, you educate, advocate, and agitate. That's exactly what you have to keep doing with this issue. Learn as much as you can. You know, I always tell people, create a strong group. JFAN, I provide, you got like a little mini education tonight. I have a day-long training program that teaches, you know, some of this information, but a lot more in depth on how to protect your community from CAFOs. I offer it for free. I just, you know, ask people to cover the cost of printing the manual. You get like a 350-page manual. I'll come up and do a training if you're interested. We can always do that, because I want to make as many community groups as self-sufficient as possible and educated as possible so they can protect their communities. I I say educate friends and neighbors. And speaking of education, I should have brought up a handout, but the JFAN annual meeting is coming up on Thursday, October 19th. We have a meeting every year at the Sondheim in Fairfield. We typically draw 400 or 500 people coming to it. This time we have Alan Gubert. He's an award-winning agricultural columnist of the Food and Farm File coming to speak. We have John Eichert speaking. Mike Carberry is going to be speaking. David Sykes on the whole legal, the right. There's a right to farm challenge. This is the last vestige of that law. There's a challenge that is before the Supreme Court right now, and he's going to speak on that, and also the new nuisance lawsuit bill that was recently passed. He's going to try to put all of that into context. So we have a really great meeting. It's called Breaking the Grip of Corporate Agriculture on Rural Iowa. October 19th. I'll send information to Deborah about it, and she can pass it along to you. If you signed the sign-in sheet, and if you left your email address, I'll send you some information on it that way too. These are great meetings. We have a really great meeting every year. I would really encourage you to come and bring as many people as you can. Look to a community rights ordinance, which I know you're looking at. Because that could be a very effective way of protecting your community, and address every CAFO that comes into your county, by letting people in the area know and helping them, if they want to fight it, or telling them about organizations that can help them fight it, like the Socially Responsible Agricultural Project. CCI, Iowa CCI also works, to help communities fight, and JFAN, SRAP and CCI can work together, because we kind of come at it from different angles sometimes, and very similar angles too. So, and then last thing, here's where you can learn more. And this is also all on your handouts. Lots of information on all those pages. And I think this went a little bit longer than I thought it might go, but what we'll do is we'll take a break, maybe about 7 minutes, 10 minutes, what do you think? 10 minutes, and then come back and we'll do all your questions that you've been holding. I'll try to answer them. I couldn't possibly go into everything, but I tried to really get the most important things that I thought would be helpful for you for your meeting.
And thank you, Diane, for that amazing presentation.
Oh, thank you for being here to learn about it. So, yes, questions. Lynn.
So I'm gonna go with my question that I asked, but I wasn't supposed to ask.
Yeah.
How you go to the assessor's office or you go to the DNR? Can we do that in Johnson County?
Yes, you
So
can.
you do it on a routine basis and you go and check, are there any of such and such? What do we do? Because we need to do this.
Yeah, so basically what you do is you go to the assessor. So when a CAFO application comes in, and this is going to be for anything that's like 500 or more animal units, so 1250 or more hogs. What we do is in Jefferson County, these applications come into the assessor's office. In some places they come into the zoning commission, if you've got a zoning commission, or they may come into the supervisor. So find out where yours come in, because before the application goes to the DNR, the county has to sign off on it, and they get a copy. So basically, you call and you just say, I'd like to find out if you've gotten any new applications for any CAFOs, in Johnson County. And these are public documents. So then they can make a copy for you. They may charge you, but they can make a copy for you. And basically we get all the paperwork. Whatever was brought in, we get it all. And we also double check with the DNR. And we do that because sometimes, it's happened to us over the 10 years I've been there, something falls through a crack. DNR, because we used to just do the DNR, and then the DNR didn't tell us something that came in. We used to, at one point I think we were just doing the assessor's office. The assessors didn't tell us. So we check twice a week, both places. And, you may only need to check once a week here in Johnson County. I don't know how many CAFOs you've got. But you may want to check twice because the thing is they can turn around pretty quickly. So that's what we do.
So if you check with the DNR, who do you contact?
Okay,
with the DNR?
I think I'm not sure which is your field office. It could either be Washington or it could be another one. So what I might suggest doing is calling Field Office 6. I'm going to guess it's probably Field Office 6. And let me give you a phone number. And I would talk to Jeff Prier there.
How do you spell his last name?
P-R-I-E-R. Washington office. Okay, 319-653-2135. And, he'll tell you if it's not the right office, and he'll give you the number and the person.
I think it's Washington.
I think so too. It's close enough. Yeah, it's just one county.
I know they've had meetings or stuff there before, so that
Yeah,
sounds
yeah.
perfect.
So that's what I would suggest doing. Now he may tell you, well, check the DNR website, and if he tells you that, call me 641-919-5002, and I'll tell you how to do that.
Okay.
Okay. What you would do is you would create a master list of what's already there, and then you would check for new ones that get added. Yeah, it's not hard, but the site is not intuitive. So, yeah. Yes, Peter.
I understand there are
Paul.
800,000 to 1 million hogs in Washington County, which borders Jefferson
Yeah.
and Johnson. But I mean, what happens at the border? Have your efforts made a difference at expansion into Jefferson County?
Yeah. So we do a lot, like I was talking about, we do a lot of community education. We're out in the public a lot. We mounted, like for example, this year we mounted a really big campaign to get our supervisors to pass a resolution in support of a factory farm moratorium. They didn't do that because they're not Johnson County supervisors, but what we did was like this huge campaign. We were in their face. We go in with these information packages when a CAFO is threatening. People hear right away that there's a CAFO. We do a lot of other community education, and we will help communities organize. We'll call in if we find that there's some sort of a manure spill. We'll work with the DNR and call that in. We'll look at the applications. I mean, we do a lot of stuff, and that's what the training program actually talks about, a lot of the stuff that we do. And as a result, what we found is that, we do get CAFOs, but we don't get as many CAFOs at all, like Washington County or Keokuk, which also has like about 250,000 or more probably at this point. And what we're finding is that, because we have the master matrix and Washington County doesn't, and some of these, Wapello County doesn't, they build just on the other side of the Jefferson County border. So we've gotten a bunch of CAFOs that are just on that border. And so we have probably, we've got about, I'm going to guess about 140-ish thousand hogs, but we don't have 1 million. We don't have 250,000 or more, and we don't get as many, coming in. So we're always in the face of the pork industry. This big annual meeting, you know, draws 400 or 500 people. Huge statement about how the community feels about CAFOs. It shows that people are invested in this issue. So, you know, through a lot of the stuff that we are keeping the numbers low. And we've had a couple of lawsuits in our county. That does a lot. That does a lot. And recently, a couple of CAFO owners was telling a friend of mine who was talking to them about something else that she was working on. He was saying, yeah, we really have to watch ourselves in Jefferson County with JFAN. You know, they're really watching out for us all the time. We got to do everything right. And, you know, so, you know, so, yeah. So
Thank you
Sure.
for doing that.
Yes, Dawn.
Do you know of any areas that are taking into account the diminished property values and using that as an argument? I live in Washington County, and there are at least 8 CAFOs that I can see from my property. So
Wow.
if I were able to make the argument to the assessor that my dwelling is only worth 1/2 of the way it is evaluated, and
Yes.
other people in that whole area did the same
Yes.
thing, that might be a
Yes.
reasonable argument.
In fact, let me have your email address before I leave, because I have a document. I think it was the University of Vermont did it. I think they did it one for each, for many states, on how to get a property tax reassessment when you've got a CAFO devaluing your property.
Right, if a
Yeah.
lot of people did that, that might have an effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I think so. I think so. It's some work, but it can be done. I think somebody that I know through the Iowa Alliance, one of our coalition members, did it for himself, and he got his property tax lowered in Boone County. So it can be done. Yes.
Okay, that can lower the tax,
Mm-hmm.
but really, once a CAFO is built, the chances are like almost zero that they're gonna shut down.
Yeah.
So your emphasis really is a long-term project
Mm-hmm.
where you try to stop them in the first place.
Yeah.
So really, if you know, there are some I grew up in northeast Keokuk County, and so if there are CAFOs around already, not likely they're going away.
Right. 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 But so at that point,
But if enough people get their taxes reduced, then the county doesn't have any income. I mean, it's always about the money.
Right.
If people get their property taxes reduced, it's gonna reduce the county's income, and then the county's gonna get pissed.
Yeah, but what are they gonna do to the farmer? Nothing.
Right now, they can't do anything.
Nothing.
Well, then,
Let me tell you what. I'm married to a family of CAFO farmers.
hmm,
Been there, done that.
that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And nothing's stopping them.
Well, and I think it was pretty obvious when they shared this document from the family that had tried a year ago to have a CAFO put in on the border of Johnson and Cedar County. But because of resistance and public opinion, the supervisors had a public hearing and they withdrew their application. But they came back last year under the daughter's married name and reapplied,
Mm-hmm.
and it was approved.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
at that time, I thought that was pretty interesting, because when I learned about this a year ago in July, end of July, the supervisors were very upset. They would not have found out about it because their operation did not require any kind of contact with the county. So they didn't have to contact the county until they got state approval, state DNR.
So they didn't have to contact the county if they.
Not until they asked for a building permit, and by then it had been approved. So
That doesn't make sense because it has to go through the county first. They have to receive the app, unless
for
it was
a
a
small
small
one,
one.
not small.
Yeah, if it's,
Well,
yeah,
1,250.
probably 1249 or 1240
Yeah.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
But this was the third one on their property.
Let me,
And
yeah.
they fudged on the factor of how far away they could be, because they were they were arguing at the state level that for economies of scale, they needed to have these closer because they were all belonged to the same family, even though.
Let me ask you this, did they put them in different LLC names? I'm guessing they did.
Well, they did the second time, that's how they got it
Yeah.
through, but
Yes.
someone at the state office notified somebody at the county supervisor's
Yes.
office, but it was already been approved.
Yeah, so we
they
have a
didn't have to go
loophole.
through the county.
Yeah, so what probably happened was that those three are all in different LLC names, or maybe,
Well, two of them are in the same
Two
name,
in the
but
same
the
name, and
daughter,
then the new
the daughter
one-
used her new married
Yeah,
married
yeah.
name, but they recognized, I mean,
Yeah.
it was the same location.
yeah. We have a loophole in Iowa, and the loophole is that it's the LLC that owns the CAFO, not the individual who owns the LLC. So you can have, Farmer Joe, and he could have, CAFO A, and that's the LLC name. CAFO B is another LLC name, CAFO C, and they can all be right next to each other, even if it was the same name, then they would be expansions, and then it would go through that whole regulatory process. But they're not doing that.
No.
They're doing all these different LLC names, and that's how they're getting around expanding and building, without any sort of regulation. And then, when they do that, no manure management place, you don't even know where they're putting the manure.
No. Well, that's how we ended up with 5,000 more CAFOs than the state thought we had, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming those
Yes.
are all smaller
Not all of them.
operations.
Not
Well,
all
not
of them.
all of them,
Yeah.
but hopefully.
Well, actually, 1,300 of them were not small ones.
Oh my gosh.
I know,
Of the 5,000?
because they require some sort of oversight, and 630 required an on-site inspection. So the medium-sized ones, which are, between $12.50 and and $24.99, the medium-sized CAFOs, they require a desktop inspection, but the large CAFOs, 2,500 or more, require an on-site inspection. How do you have 1,300 CAFOs that are that size, and you don't know where they are?
That to me is that's just negligence.
It's
I mean,
astounding.
that's why we have such poor water quality in this state.
Yeah,
Partially.
yeah.
But interestingly enough,
Yeah.
this woman was at the July comprehensive plan meeting and left this document which was shared with us. And something really, really bothered me, of course, besides the fact that she used every argument that you had listed there.
Yeah.
None of which makes any sense to me. But anyway, what bothered me the most was she was talking about how farming has changed over the years. And she says, it's changed in more ways than we could list. Many of the changes have had positive effects on the environment. Now we raise hogs in confinement buildings, where the environment is controlled rather than raising pigs outside in the heat or cold. The buildings are near our home place. The hogs themselves have genetically changed.
That's true.
And are not as fat and cannot tolerate the cold as well as their predecessors. No, I'm not an animal husbandry person.
No, that's probably right.
That is right.
But the fact of the matter is that they're genetically changing these animals.
Yeah.
Okay, then they're feeding them genetically modified corn and
Yes.
grain.
Yes.
What are we getting in terms of poison
Yes.
that's being put into our bodies? I mean,
Yes.
and there is no way between the water pollution and the fact that they're genetically modifying the meat and there's no disclosure on that. How do you find this stuff out? The government makes sure that there's no way that you can find these things out.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just totally irresponsible. She talks about the seed. She talks about crop farming. The seed is more resistant to changes in moisture or insects. Our farm now uses fewer chemicals and no-tilling the soil to preserve the land. And I'm thinking, what planet? I mean, you don't genetically modify something and not have any consequences of it.
No, you don't.
People are so misinformed, but these people have bought this whole story.
Well,
and they think they're really helping us all by providing us
Yeah.
leaner pork,
You're right.
that's fed with poison. I mean, I don't know, but I just.
Well, from what I
Stop eating
understand,
meat. I mean, it's crazy unless you know the source.
Unless you know
Right.
the farmer next door and you trust him and you see what he does, you don't know what you're putting in.
no,
your
you
mouth.
don't. You don't.
But I think the statistics, the health statistics, really are so underrated. And I've talked to people about this in epidemiology and other places, and they said the problem is just designing the studies. It's very difficult to design studies to try to pinpoint and make the correlation strong and have enough power in the study, have enough people. But I think it's coming. I mean, I think we have to do this because we're killing people.
Yeah. I agree. And truthfully, I think, like I said before, it's not a sustainable industry. It's a very like energy intensive industry, which has
It is.
its own issues, but it's creating a lot of disease. And at some point, this is going to become this industry, either from the MRSA or the health impacts from eating this poor quality of meat, is going to have some serious public health issues, some consequences, and I think, yeah, I think eventually it's just going to implode on itself. In fact, Alan Gubert, who's going to be speaking, he's got a vision. He's going to be speaking at the annual meeting. He's got a vision of how it's going to reverse itself, and it's already starting, because there's more awareness now. It's growing about what we're doing to ourselves, and more people, wanting to buy. As much as people are in like a cloud about what they're actually getting, there's more awareness growing. And I want to say one more thing about, drinking the Kool-Aid there. The Iowa State University, all these land grant universities, they're getting funding from the industry. And so their studies and their work is basically expressing, what the industry wants it to express.
Of course.
I think University of Iowa, it doesn't quite fall into that category, and it kind of falls out of favor. And tell me if I'm wrong, Paul, but it kind of falls out of favor with the Board of Regents, because it's not like Iowa State, and so you can't really trust a lot of the information that comes out of Iowa State. But all these farmers and these young farmers, they're getting educated in this baloney. And, we've just lost the Leopold Center. It's like, oh God, it's like that was the one spark of light up there,
We're going to wrap up very soon, but I have one final question. And that is, one thing that I missed in your presentation was a link between this kind of agriculture, which isn't agriculture at all, it's a corporate factory, and climate change, because we're big, grannies are big on the issue of climate change. And I know it's linked, and I know there's a strong link.
There's a strong link. And I'm not that, I'll be honest, I don't focus that much on the whole climate part of this, but livestock production in general, and it doesn't have to be just CAFOs, but livestock production in general, I think contributes, what is it, like 9% of
Lynn
all?
can tell us.
It's more than that.
Is it more
They just
than-
found out the cattle are contributing 11% more than what they initially thought, but anyway.
Wow. Yeah, so
What's
it's
that
like,
film we saw? What was the film we saw? It started Cow something.
Cowspiracy.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, Cowspiracy.
yeah, I haven't seen that
A lot
one.
of information in that.
Yeah, yeah. So it is very strongly linked.
14.5%.
And part of it
Places
too is,
say as high as 50%.
51, yeah.
part of it is too is this intensive corn, soy, cropping,
Yeah.
monocropping. And we're not sequestering a lot of the carbon that can be sequestered, you know, in our soil, which we should be doing. So yeah, there is definitely a link, but I think it goes beyond even CAFOs. But there's also, like when I said, it's a very energy intensive, I mean, it takes electricity to run those CAFOs.
Yeah.
Huge amount of electricity, you know, that you don't need to be spending, you know, burning up if you've got animals on pasture or if you've got them in hoop houses or anything. So, you know, in that way, also, it's not sustainable.
Can I ask one more question? Well, do you try and explain to people that CAFO products are 98% or meat, dairy, and eggs? I mean, because I don't think most people understand that almost every single thing that's meat, dairy, or eggs comes from one of these places.
Yeah.
And I mean, we need to educate the public
We absolutely
so they
do.
quit supporting these places.
Yes, yeah. We try to do that.
Do you?
Yeah, we try to do that. And, you know, there's stuff on our website. One of the little booklets here that we did for an annual meeting a couple of years ago, so it's got some events in there that are overdue. But it's, you know, like how to basically steer away from buying CAFO meats, you know, and support your local farmers and what have you. I mean, on our Facebook page, oh, you should check out our JFan Facebook page. We post a lot of good stuff on there. You know, when there's an article that relates to like horrendous food production or local food, you know, we always, you know, underscore, you know, buy local, know your farmer, that type of thing. You know, don't support the CAFO industry because, you know, we have to change. And then we're going to be talking about that at the annual meeting. I think Alan Goopert's going to be speaking on that. You know, we have to change our buying patterns. It's the consumer that drives the change. It's the consumer that drove the change to, you know, cage-free eggs. It's the consumer that got rid of a lot of the RGBH, you know, that was in milk. You know, it's consumers that drive a lot of the change that we see in the industry, and that's what we really need, is to keep educating consumers more and more and more.
Well, thank you for educating us.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for coming. And let's get to work.
I'm going to leave these with you. Oh, no? Property values.